Well, welcome everyone to the Berggren Forum. Just have one announcement, which is that next week's Berggren Forum will be given by Ray Young, who is Professor of Practice in the School of Art and Design here at Oxford University. And the title of her presentation is Beyond Screaming Yellow, Actions of Resistance and Resilience in Art. And today we're delighted to have two co-presenters. We have Mina Sedaghat, sorry, Mina, I practiced it. And,
that's okay.
She's Assistant Professor of Education at AU. And we have Anton Puvirajah, who is the Assistant Professor of STEM Education at the University of Western Ontario. And they are collaborating on research, and they are going to present some of that collaboration. Now, the title of their talk is Empowering Underserved and Underrepresented Students Through Computational Thinking and Modeling. So please take it away.
Thank you, Emrys, and thank you everyone for being here. What we would focus in this presentation is on what is computational thinking and modeling, its relationship to the STEM, and why we need to empower underserved and underrepresented students in computational thinking and computational modeling, and how this could be even possibly happen. Anton?
Thank you, Mina. Thank you, Emrys, as well. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anton, and I'm an assistant professor of STEM education from the University of Western Ontario. So I think it's important for us to provide a bit of a contextual background to what we are going to be presenting in terms of how we got here. Our academic work, and more specifically my academic work, focuses on STEM education and also STEM engagement of underrepresented and minoritized students. And this work goes back several years, about 12 years in the United States and Canada. My focus had been on, and continues to be on, getting underrepresented and minoritized students to engage in STEM through informal experiences. Within this, I have primarily focused on African American and Latino students in after school and summer programs, and in museums and science center settings. Mina, you can go ahead.
Thank you. So let's define what is computational thinking. Computational thinking has a long and magnificent history in school education, dating all the way back to the Seymour Papert introduction of computer programming through the use of logo. Papert argued that CT can give children unprecedented power to invent and carry on exciting projects in 1972. Since then, the concept of computational thinking has given many definitions. For instance, Wing frequently used the definition of computational thinking to refer to the thoughtful process required in conceiving a problem and communicating its solution in a fashion that a human, a machine, or a combination of human machine can effectively execute. According to the studies, CT enables novel methods to problem solving and a share in the untapped domain of abstract thinking. So as an example, as you see in the picture, this is one of the studies that Anton and we've done. This is about the STEM identification of underrepresented immigrant youth in CSTEM summer camp project that we've done at UW. In the picture that you see, children took part in actively in making concrete city experience in their own groups. They were effectively engaged in the CT activities through reflective observation and co-creation of the solution for the given problems. So underrepresented immigrants were children who experienced some gaps or delay, had low SES, like socio-economic status, different races, and ethnicity. Some were refugees as well. So we examined how computational modeling in a collaborative engagement environment inspires students' interest and attitude towards STEM discipline, which was a very, very positive result that we get. I also need to say that for Sedaghat et al., for instance, suggested that computational abstraction instead of computational thinking, which is grounded in experience and problem solving that includes practices such as problem representation, abstraction, decomposition, simulation, verification, and prediction, that they are all part of definition that have been widely used. All these computational thinking affordances that I mentioned are also central to modeling, reasoning, problem solving in a large number of scientific, engineering, and mathematics disciplines. The studies have indicated that computational thinking offers new approaches to problem solving, bring the untouched realm of abstract concept into existence through the use of different digital tools as well, which is another area that we have been focusing so far. So therefore, computational thinking tools are varied from touchscreen-based programming, robots, and digital circuits programming, and controlling to more broadly an algorithmic method of real-world problem solving that could be carried out with a single computer or simple computer. CT is everywhere, and I wanted to put this slide together just to show, because we have a lot of times when I speak about this with my students, they don't think that certain things regularly work computer science, and so people have to get out of their big misnomer that computer science is just coding, which is not really computer science is. Coding is a part of, is a piece of, is a portion of computer science, but computer science and CT is a little bit of everything involved in technology. As you can see in this picture, it's not only the use of social media, but it's e-sport, it's art, it's music production, analyzing video, data collection, stats, and arts and fashion, as you see, are really, they are everywhere, and they are really added to our lives. But CT comes to be taken as an important, not only for STEM industries and professionals, but also for every student. Nonetheless, it's performed instructionally within a computer science disciplines mostly. But it is important to recognize that T, meaning technology, and also E as an engineering and STEM, are not the same as computer science. That is to say, a focus on computer as a tool does not serve either T or C as well. To be clear, the use of computers as one of many educational technologies is essential in this age. However, it should not be confused with the study of technology, which provides a student with opportunity to learn about processes of design, fundamental concepts of technology and engineering, and the limits and possibilities of technology in the society. Evan Neger and Atkinson claim that computer science is not a component of STEM because it's not even mentioned in the acronym. So thus, I would say CT integrated STEM, and I would use this term as a CSTEM that we have been using before, with leveraging computational thinking and computer science related concept, computational abstraction, computing and modeling tools, problem solving, specific CT process and practices in a STEM. Just to show how disparity exists, looking at this graph that I've taken and borrowed from World Economic Forum, you will see that more than 80% of the jobs that will exist in 2030 haven't been invented yet. And the most in-demand skills for the future are high cognitive thinking skills that includes advanced literacy and writing, critical thinking, quantitative reasoning and statistical skills, as well as social and emotional skills that includes advanced communication, empathy, to be adaptive, the ability to learn continuously. And lastly is the technological and computational, which includes everything from basic to advanced IT, computing skills, data analysis, and engineering. And that takes a really big portion of the skills that everybody needs. And also, these future skills are likely to be the most highly paid, which can help to cover the poverty for the people who are underserved. But who is computer science? There are lots of bias in when you search through the search engine, but I wanted to make it a little bit less biased. So I used DuckDuckGo to search who is the computer science. This is the picture that came up. You see the stereotypes, the workplace, how the workplace look like. Most of them are male, white people that they are working in this. And also the type of work that they are doing is really seen to coding only. There's only one lady that is not white and from another ethnicity. So as you can see, there is some disparity even for the definition. And there is inequality in computer science education. And as you see, despite the increased significance of computer science education, computational thinking and computing literacy across all the field and occupation, access to computer science education is unequally distributed by the race, by gender, by socioeconomic status, and geography. Just 47% of high schools in the United States offer computer science courses. Black, Latinx, and Native American students from low-income communities are significantly less likely to have access to CS courses in their school, which will affect them later. And disparities in school funding and access to resources such as broadband, technology devices, qualified and certified teachers, and rigorous STEM and computer science courses limit the student opportunity for educational success. And this picture, you can see a comparison between the genders, unfortunately, it does have only male and female, but even in looking at the graph, you will see that female has much lower opportunity in taking, or less interest and attitude toward taking the courses in computer science and do the APCS. Anton?
Thank you, Mina. So, the title of the presentation is, empowering underserved and underrepresented students. So we need to be thinking about who is underrepresented. Mina just, spoke about a few. So different disciplines and fields may have different groups of individuals being underrepresented.
Yes.
I'm getting some crosstalk, is that right?
Yes.
For example, in elementary schools, male teachers are underrepresented. In STEM, whether it be in STEM education or in STEM fields, it is quite often that non-Asian minoritized students are underrepresented, along with students of low socioeconomic status, girls, and children of refugee and recent immigrant backgrounds. Mina? So why is it important for us to focus on underrepresented students? There are many reasons for this. An overarching reason is that it is a social justice and an equity issue that privileges certain students over others. We also need to focus on underrepresented students because it allows us to bridge the educational and workplace gaps in representation. We want all citizens to be literate in computational thinking and in STEM, so that we can have a society that is scientifically minded and uses evidence-based critical thinking, so that as a society, we can grapple with all the challenges that face us today, most of which are scientifically based. And also, when our students do well in computational thinking and in STEM, we are setting them up for success and also for a better socioeconomic future. So next slide. So let's begin with a scenario that I have experienced or saw when I was a faculty member in Atlanta at Georgia State University. My area of expertise is in STEM teacher education. And as part of my responsibility, I visit schools to observe our teacher candidates. So I would visit these many schools around the metro Atlanta area, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. Essentially, wherever our students are placed, I would visit them and observe them teaching. So in addition to observing them teaching, observing our student teachers teach, I was also observing something that made me quite uneasy. Imagine or picture this. Next slide, please. So in a middle school that I used to visit, students enter the school building through a door-frame metal detector guarded by a school resource officer. This resource officer is a sworn law enforcement officer. Once in the school building, students are subject to dress code inspection. They're reprimanded for gathering in groups and moved along quickly out of the hallway into the classroom. The talk and the interactions of adults during these events are demeaning and authoritative in tone, and largely, without regard to the dignity of the student. Additionally, it's a routine practice in the schools that we work in for students to walk in single file with the on the right hand of the right side of the hallway along a colored tape line on the floor. And sometimes it's also that they have, they're required to have one hand behind their backs and the other hand's index finger on top of their lips. The teacher, monitors students' actions. So these and other, institutionalized practices that focus on control, management, and compliance strip students of their identity and agency and have a really deeply demoralizing effect. Next slide, please.
Okay, so I would like you to think a little bit, like few seconds, and read the slide and tell us what institution does this describe on what you see on the screen, and type it in the chat box, please. What do you think this institution could be? Sounds like a prison. Thank you. Prison, military, boot camp. Thank you. Prison. Okay.
Absolutely. Boot camp, prison.
High intensity.
Yeah. Next slide, Mina. So as researchers and educators, we've seen these types of oppressive practices in schools being played out on a daily routine basis from the moment the student walks into the school building and when they either get on the bus or when they walk to school, walk back home. Unfortunately, these practices often resemble, just like you all said, routines observed in a boot camp or a prison system. And it seems to prepare students to that institution rather than for transforming them or transferring them to really work within their society in a productive way. Just a reminder, our focus here is on empowering underserved and underrepresented students. And the scenario that I just presented is not necessarily empowering. So this scenario is the example of oppression and oppressive acts. So we see these types of scenario over and over again, and although maybe in different degrees, all across the country. Students who generally suffer from these oppressive acts are primarily Black and brown. So when these oppressive acts happen, how do we expect our Black and brown students, our underrepresented and our underserved students to flourish academically, yet alone in STEM or computational thinking? So because of these and other types of oppressive acts, preparing underrepresented minority students for careers in STEM in the United States continues to be a challenge. We know from various policy documents and also from our own research and from our general observation that underrepresented minority student participation in STEM and computational thinking careers is much lower than their representation in the US population. Though our economy depends on the talents and skills of STEM workers, only 3 to 5% of Black and Hispanic students or Hispanic individuals hold technical or STEM jobs. And according to the National Academy of the Sciences, Black and Hispanic students, they don't choose STEM careers in large numbers. So it has been argued that the lack of opportunities in computational thinking for underrepresented students should be considered as a social justice issue that impedes the efforts to achieve equity. The combined challenges related to the shift in demographics and the lack of opportunities for participation in STEM by underrepresented minority students, it resonates with the larger social fabric of our country and also has dire consequences. Next slide, please. So our research group, Mina and others, we take a Foucauldian and a Freirean perspective to this issue. Next slide. So for Foucault, the power is omnipresent. And along with power, there's oppression and also resistance. So power in tandem with oppression are ubiquitous in all of our interactions that we have with others, including our interactions that happen in the schools. And according to Foucault, schools are considered as enclosures, meaning that they are isolated and function to separate students from the rest of the society to ensure that they are under control. We have seen that somewhere else as well. So the distribution and enactment of power within the enclosure of the school is unequal in that the authoritarian school personnel control and turn students into what Foucault calls docile bodies. So next slide. So continue to use a Foucauldian lens. Rosado and colleagues say that students are violated in schools by oppressive systems that practice authoritarian abuse and place needless academic restrictions on them, labels, tracks, and promotes a cultural infringement on students who fail to fit into their educational and personal ideologies. Schools are also seen as places to domesticate students into the dominant cultural practices of the institution and the larger society. And these institutionalized oppressive practices that focus on control, management, and compliance strip students of their identity and agency and have a deeply demoralizing effect. Next slide, please. So Paulo Freire describes these oppressive conditions at schools as banking, and some of us are familiar with that term. In banking, students' brains are considered as objects or vessels that are used to deposit the oppressor's knowledge. So the oppressor has the power to determine what goes into that vessel and what is avoided. So in the school, the teacher becomes the arbiter of knowledge. Next slide, please. So the Freirean view is that the student is treated as a thing, as an object. And as such, because the student is a thing, the student has no consciousness. And this prevents awareness of one's condition. And this also limits innovative thinking in our students, and the growth of true intellect is limited. So true intellect is cultivated only when students are conscious or become aware of their social conditions. So this becoming conscious of one's social condition is called conscientization. And through conscientization, the oppressed gain capacity by way of critical thinking, first to become aware, and then to interrogate their oppressive conditions. And this leads to emancipation or liberation. Next slide. So how do we mitigate these oppressive conditions in the formal educational space? So we need to be thinking about providing students with a situation where learning is self-motivated, where it's voluntary, and is also guided by the learner's needs and interests. So in the classroom, this can be enacted by providing students with choice to take part in learning experiences that are meaningful to them, by letting students take part in learning experiences on a voluntary basis, and letting students decide on the extent of their participation. And when this happens, the teacher and the student create and foster a more symmetrical relationship in terms of power, where they can learn from each other as collaborators. Both the teacher and student become subjects with consciousness of knowledge creation. And here in this situation, students and teachers use their minds to interact and engage with the world around them and incorporate their lived experiences to create knowledge that is meaningful to them. So in order for students to have learning experiences that are meaningful and authentic, the learning experiences need to incorporate their lived experiences. While the incorporation of lived experience is necessary for authentic learning, the quality of the incorporation should also be considered. So the quality of their lived experience and how they incorporate that into their learning is based on bringing to the learning experience the cognitive, the situational, and a critical lens to computational thinking. So the cognitive is when students learn key computational concepts, practices, and perspectives. The focus is on skill building and competencies for college and career. The situational computational thinking is where creative expression and social engagement become the motivator for getting proficient at computational thinking. And finally, an important contributor for authentic learning in computational thinking is critical computational thinking. This is where students examine values, practices, and infrastructure underlying computation. with a broader goal of social and ecological justice. Next slide, please. So within the computational thinking context in the classroom, our view is that in order to realize discursive practices of conscientization, we need to focus on the critical aspect of computational thinking by supporting students in ways that enable them to realize their oppressive conditions and to provide them with the necessary skills and tools to mitigate their oppressive conditions. Next slide, please. So finally, here are some examples of computational modeling activities, very briefly, that facilitate conscientization. So these examples can include students having computational modeling activities related to food insecurity, gentrification, voter suppression, redistricting, gerrymandering, algorithmic bias, climate change and how it affects certain neighborhoods more than others, school safety, funding, and quality as well. So for example, we can use these high quality computational thinking activities in the classroom to work towards conscientization, while at the same time engaging our students to become more proficient in the concepts and practices of computational thinking. Mina, it's yours.
Thank you, Anton. So I love this slide so much. You can absolutely be what you can't see. And that's why innovators and disruptors do. It's coming from Kimberly Bryant, an American engineering and founder and executive director of Black Girls in the Code. It's important that we developed teacher understanding of computational thinking in the context of subject matter that they teach, especially in early years. Otherwise, I would say teachers may only gain an abstract understanding of what is computational thinking, and their knowledge will remain inert and they will be unable to incorporate it into their teaching. Again, this is most important for K2, like early childhood, elementary school, and middle school teacher education program. I would also argue that the real world problem solving and decision-making nature of computational thinking support participatory learning and collaborative engagement. Therefore, to support the future of our nation, the seeds of computational thinking as the key element of STEM must be planted early, along with and in support of the seed of literacy to grow well-informed, critical citizens prepared for a digital tomorrow, as I explained before. However, teachers in early childhood and environments need more robust training and professional development to achieve these goals. So our aim as a STEM educator is to develop student voice, agency, and identity through computational thinking and modeling, blended in STEM or integrated in STEM. In addition, I would say teachers in early childhood, as I mentioned, they really need a robust training. They would learn to avoid stereotypes to shape student identity and their performance, and leverage technology in every single subject that they teach, with understanding what computational thinking is, and hopefully involve marginalized students to become developers, not consumers of the technology, so they would have their own autonomy. To achieve this, I volunteered to become part of the CSDA Equity Award Committee member to make sure that the equity, to help a little bit in that regard. All right, thank you so much for listening to our presentation, and now we are open to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mina. Thank you, Anton. So open for questions.
I think there has been one question in the chat that was asked about let me find it.
so that Danny made a comment that the description of the authoritarian institution can help explain why so many people start to resent education. It seems a good point. One question occurred to me is whether you'd put limits on autonomy when you were talking about autonomy. For instance, when it comes to curriculum, do you envisage, how to what extent do you envisage students helping to develop their own curricula?
Anton,
yeah, sure. Thanks for that question. Yes, in terms of students developing their curriculum, I think they definitely can develop their curriculum. And of course, states and other jurisdictions will have their state standards. And even with the state standards, being true to the state standards, students can also still, along with their mentors, along with their teachers, can develop the curriculum that is enacted in the classroom. And quite often, what I've noticed, especially in Atlanta, is that the state curriculum or the county curriculum documents are highly prescriptive. They have the standards, but also they give you the lessons to teach, and sometimes the supplies list and everything else. So for a novice teacher, it sounds like something that's godsend. Well, I don't have to do anything. I just got to follow this recipe. It is highly limiting for innovative teaching and also for innovative learning in the students. So there is, of course, so there are limitations to autonomy, and but I think our view is that we need to be working towards ensuring that students have a say in how they're learning and what they're learning more and more.
Okay. Desmond has his hand up.
Thank you, Amaris. Hi, Mina. Hi, Anton. Thank you for the presentation. I did have a question, though, because just to get your thoughts. How would this apply to students who are being homeschooled? For students who are sort of outside of a traditional brick and mortar public school atmosphere.
That Mina, can I, or you want to?
I can start and you can just fill up. So thank you for this question. That's very important. And we had this discussion quite often the time at CSDA, like how we can help the student who do not have access to the public schools through the process. So there are some websites and there are some like code.org, or even there are lots of CSDA events that there are made for parents so they can attend for free. The materials will be sent to them for free, but it's kind of difficult to reach to them. We have these difficulties for now. However, they're trying to make all these events like night events, so parents and children all together can attend, and they make the curriculum is a bit wider so everyone can learn how to play the games. We call them the games to make them more engaging for the students. But yeah, there are problems there, but people are thinking how they can resolve it. Anton, would you like to add? You're on mute.
Desmond, thank you. I was speaking while I was muted. I work in the informal learning spaces. So we also consider then homeschooling to be an informal learning space. Yes, there's a curriculum that parents or caregivers might need to follow, but it's still informal in the way that there's a lot of flexibility, like you said. Bricks and you're not in the formal classroom setting. Parents have very different ways of doing this, so it really comes to the caregiver or the parent to determine how this is done, and it can vary so much, right? It can vary from parent to parent, from typical worksheets to I've actually seen parents take the students on field trips on a daily basis. They're never home, so it's not just one parent and a child, but 2 or 3 children who are in this homeschooling group. They go on field trips to learn, and kids decide what they want to learn. And it may not be in sequence, but they get the things done by the end of the year or in a couple of years, all over whatever is needed in the state curriculum. So I think in terms of homeschooling, there's a lot of freedom, and it's just really the limiting factor is the caregiver or the parent or the instructor or the teacher, and how they handle that situation.
Thank you.
I can see one question. I'm sorry for jumping here. I can see one question that is really, really interesting about, and Tim Cox asked, is about how can I create change in my students at the college level who have come up through the oppressive, restrictive disciplines of their minds and bodies in their elementary and high school education. I have a hard time getting the students of color to participate.
Do you want me to try answering that, Mina?
Sure, you can start and then.
Sure. So, and I can attest to this as well. When I was, especially in Atlanta, when I was teaching my science methods course, I've had students, coming in. These are, students who want to be teachers, science teachers, coming in thinking it's going to be all lecture and note taking and quizzes. So those are the oppressive conditions that they are used to, and they are expecting that. So Freire also talks about that. Freire talks about the issue of that the oppressed, the person who's oppressed almost tends to take the identity of the oppressor, or expects to behave like what the oppressor wants to, because that's the easiest way. So we see that I've seen that personally in my methods classes. So it takes a couple of weeks, 3 weeks or so for them to slowly understand. Well, you know what, guys, our class is going to be slightly different. It's not going to be, a whole lot of, PowerPoint slides. It's not going to be a textbook. You're not going to have a quiz. It's going to be about solving a case. It's going to be about us visiting schools and observing and taking things down. It's going to be about us practicing things. So definitely, I see that. So it is, it's a slow process, but I think the process is really empowering to the students. And one of the things that, kind of, really limits that, limits their, thinking in terms of, can I really actually do this, is also the assessment part. When students come into the classroom, it's all about how are they being assessed? What do I need to, get a good grade or good mark? And that is the focus, and not necessarily the experience. So if we can, de-emphasize the assessment part and focus on the experience, quality experience, that could go some ways into getting students of color, minoritized students, to participate. And quickly want to add to that as also, whatever the activity, it also needs to be relevant to them. Relevancy means, it doesn't necessarily need to be authentic. I sometimes tend to go between authentic and relevancy, but there's a difference. It needs to be relevant. How can they use it? How can they use it in real life? How can they also connect it to their lived experience as well? I think I'll stop there. I think, yeah.
Sure. And I would also add, in teaching science, there is a method that we follow that we call it 5E. And this 5E instruction have exploration, explanation, elaboration, and then evaluation, and all the E's that comes together. But the way, as Anton mentioned, we are not following the same way of doing the assessment. Students are really open to do the project, gain some insight about it, and do the work that they want, make it more autonomous, giving them lots of choices to come up with their own idea, and feel that they do have autonomy to do the things that they want. And as Anton mentioned, they are relevant to their life and relevant to their society. So yeah, it's difficult, and I also face that team. Yeah. But there are some hope, and I'm seeing even in my other courses that I'm teaching right now in Alfred, that students who are arts major are very, very open to explore computational thinking in a way that is connected to their own field, their own body movement. And it's so exciting. Sorry, Sandra, I didn't want to just move on. Sandra asked, what did you, because we both have some experience in Canada and United States, are the challenges faced by the schools and minoritized student different to countries from that we haven't studied or not? For me, they are very similar, but there are some differences in some ways because the education system in Canada is different. The rules is different, culture is a little bit different, but there are, at the same time, there are lots of similarities in a way that students are minoritized in both countries.
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities, I think. Similarities, but also at the same time, the extent is different. The extent of whatever is different, whether in the schools or even in general, society. And one of the issues that I've seen, I moved here, from Georgia a few years back, and one of the things that it reminded me coming to Canada is that teachers, it seems, are treated more as a professional here as compared to the US. And this is a very blanket statement, so I need to be really cautious with that. But from my experience in working in Georgia and versus here, for example, like I just mentioned earlier on, state curriculum documents, county curriculum documents are highly prescriptive, to the lesson, to assessments and things like that. Highly prescriptive in the sense, well, as a teacher, you're not capable of coming up with your own lesson. So let me give you the lesson. Let the state give you the lesson. This is what I'm asking you to teach. So that, gives the perspective that, that you're not a profession. You're not a professional to come up with your own lesson. So that's a huge, difference that I see in the two jurisdictions, I would say. And it also boils down to economics. Teachers are generally paid better in Canada compared to the US, and so and that also has has a factor to play as well, I believe.
We have two more questions, I think, Anton, and only 3 minutes left.
Sure.
One question came from Vicky that what does making learning entirely voluntary look like in a classroom? What if they don't feel like engaging in any of the learning activities? Absolutely. So from my point of view, we don't have entirely voluntary in the classroom. It's structured in some ways, but we are giving lots of choices to students to follow what they want in a way that help them to make autonomous environment for them. What do you say?
Same thing, and Vicky, thank you for that question. My research is in informal learning spaces. Informal learning spaces are more voluntary than formal, but a lot of things from the informal can go into the formal. And here in voluntary, just like Mina said, it's the degree to which students have choice. So we're always aiming to mitigate or really mitigate the power imbalances between the student and the teacher. So if the power imbalance is like this, you try to make that narrower, the power gap between the student and the teacher narrower, not necessarily completely disappear, but make it a little bit more narrower. And that's the aim, I think, within the formal classroom setting.
We have two minutes for, there's one more question there from Marianne Whitmore, if you'd like to address that in the time we have.
Sure. The question is that how do you use this in high school when our high schools are full of violence and teachers spend so much of time with dealing with those students?
All right, Mina, you can take that question.
I don't have that much of I don't have that much of experience to answer this question, but I found that if you change the way that you're teaching and the student feel engaged, be in the flow, be authentic, slowly you will see some changes in their behaviors and the ways that they take responsibility of what they are doing in terms of violence or even improper maybe behavior. But again, I don't have contextual information about this, so I can't really help more. Anton, would you like to?
Yeah, this is a societal challenge. I think it's not up to one teacher really.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I might be slightly departing from what Mina has said, and it's so not all the weight should be on the teacher. It's a system. It's a whole bunch of stakeholders that are involved. So all stakeholders need to be part of that. So it's a very good question, Marianne, and as you know, that's I don't think we have a clear answer. At the teacher level, at the classroom level, all I can say is that you're working to empower students in whatever way you can. And I've come across teachers in schools that you've just described who students really look up to, who stay with them even after after the end of the school day, because they feel like that teacher is a safe place to be with. So it's more about completing high school or completing middle school. It's about having students be empowered to learn and to be part of part of that learning experience.
Okay, well, we are at the end of our time, so I'd like to thank Anton and thank Mina for a wonderful and very thought-provoking presentation, and many people in the chat have commented on how interesting and stimulating and thought-provoking it was. So we'll finish there and hope to see you all next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you. Bye-bye.